it's always such a powerful excerpt from that letter. So what stood out to you tonight, Howard, as you read it? What we had the most significance for you?
Well, his aha moment, almost absolute dependence on people or circumstances to supply me with prestige, security, and the like. Um, was at a step one meeting because we had a couple of newcomers, and I was talking, and I said, when I came in here, I was pissed because I did not get what I am supposed to have.
Hmm.
I'm supposed to be a millionaire by 30, all right, by 40, all right, by 50. I'm supposed to have the long-term life, 3.5 kids, dog, cat, all that sort of stuff. And I had none of that. So I was pissed at the world.
Yeah.
Well, and as I've learned, that was my unhealthy demand. And then over here, when he talks about examining, he says, at the root of it will be some unhealthy dependency and as consequent, unhealthy demand. So it's like keep doing the same stuff over and over with the same results. And finally, you go, it's not working, is it? Somebody told me. And I said, doesn't appear to, does it? Well, maybe we may take a look at this. Or as a friend of mine who is a Buddhist, he says, this is just your path, Howard.
Well, you know, what really stood out for me when you were sharing this, Howard, is that the idea, the big lie here was that if you had all those things, you'd be okay.
Yeah.
See, that's the big lie. See, that's that dependence we have on things being a certain way to be okay. And when we believe that, see the impact of that, the deleterious effect of that is that we diminish our sense of our participation to find that path to being okay, as though that path lies in what we achieve rather than who we are. Well, we are continuing to go through the 12 steps and using the 12 and 12 to really extricate from Bill's writings in the 1950s some of his ideas about emotional sobriety. And as we've discussed up to this point in time, these first three steps, he didn't really tie in emotional sobriety as clearly as he does later on as he starts to talk about steps 4 through 12. So we're taking a lot of liberty, myself and Tom and Julia and Tom Potash when he's here and Herb Kagan, to talk a little bit about, not a little bit, to talk a lot about these steps and to look at these steps as taking, as Ernie Larson called it, the second first step. See, the first step was directed at breaking our bonds of our addiction. The second first step is to look at our problems that are caused by how we live our lives, by the attitudes, expectations, beliefs that we have that turn life into an impossible way of life. Herb and I used to describe that as is really focusing on the second half of the first step, but I think it's a better way to say it is that if we take the second first step, then we realize that we're powerless over this demand we have for environmental support and that it has created an unmanageable life. You see, that's what the first step looks like when you take a second first step. That my emotional dependence has created an impossible way of life. It's put the cart before the horse. I demand that reality and life conform to my expectations rather than learning how to cope with life as it is. And that shift in responsibility where I'm now making my environment responsible for me instead of stepping up and taking responsibility keeps me at an impasse. It keeps me stuck in my development. And as you've heard me say before, we're not sick, we're stuck. We're stuck. We're at an impasse. We haven't grown up. Is the problem, and it's a serious one. So our second first step is a realization of admitting we're powerless over this and need for environmental support, and that it's made my life unmanageable. See, if I really embrace that, then I fall into what I like to describe as an existential crisis. I'm in trouble. I'm living life in a way that is not going to result in happy and easy and good living. It's just not. It's going to create a hell of a lot of problems. It's going to create an unmanageable life. And yet, I don't know anything else. I don't have any other possibilities available to me. That's the existential crisis I'm in. And what we've talked about is how the steps are engineered, that they create a certain kind of an energy, a certain charge in one step that's discharged and resolved in the step that's following it. And then that step in itself creates a new energy that needs to be resolved. Well, you can clearly hear what the energy is in the first step, right? Is, boy, I'm in trouble and I don't have any solution for it. The second step comes along and it gives us hope. I came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. I suggested to you that having faith in this force that's inside you that we could call a biological and psychological imperative to grow you into what you can be is the force that can restore us to sanity. Because when we get in touch with that force, that organismic wisdom, our life will unfold in some amazing ways. But the problem with it is that if we take that force and we dedicate our lives to actualizing a concept of who we should be, we now become the best false self that we can be, the best pseudo self we can be. And that just contributes to more of our problems. So this second step, it's a tongue twister. The second step is all about having hope that there is a way for me to grow up, that it is possible for me to go through the hell gates of suffering and use that suffering to develop some maturity and wisdom. And that goes against almost every natural instinct that wants to avoid suffering and pain. And yet the path to emotional sobriety is through really embracing our pain and learning as much as we can from that pain. Billie Jean King used to say, I'm a sports psychologist in addition to being a clinical psychologist. And I did a workshop with her doing a sports psychology presentation for a bunch of junior tennis players in San Diego. And I loved her line was, if you lose, don't lose the lesson. If you lose, don't lose the lesson. If you suffer, don't lose the lesson. Extract from that suffering and your pain every ounce of wisdom that you can wring from that experience. So now I have hope that there is a possibility. There is a way for me to grow up. There is a way for me to transcend this consciousness that says I'm okay if, and develop a consciousness that says I'm okay even if. That's the path we're on. That's where hope comes from, that there is that possibility in our life. So now, where step 2 resolves the crisis that was created in step 1, step 2 creates another desire, another charge, another energy, attention. Because hope without action is just fantasy. It becomes a false hope. So now this leads us to step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. Step 3 resolves the tension in step 2 that was created by being hopeful that there's a new possibility in our life. So now the third step is making a commitment to discovering what it means to pursue what we call, what Bill Wilson called, I should say, a true independence of spirit. What I like to think of as emotional freedom. a life that creates emotional autonomy, a life that can work under any conditions whatsoever, a life that is not based on things being a certain way for us to be okay. You see, we're making a commitment to be able to take whatever experience we have and know that it's not the experience we have that's creating the problem. It's our relationship to that experience. It's the meaning we give to it and how we're coping with it that creates the problem. It's not the event itself. I had a lot of opportunity to practice this coming back from Kelowna, British Columbia. Took me 48 hours to get home. And at every step of the way, is when there was a cancellation and another disappointment, I kept reminding myself, this is reality now. The issue is going to be how I cope with it. And I would give myself a pretty good grade in terms of how I did with that. I got back, I accepted, I was worn out and beat up, but I was not worse for the wear and tear that it would put on me. Whereas before I would have been angry, I would have been upset and frustrated, I would have written nasty letters to United Airlines, I mean, and all this other stuff, which would have changed none of the reality that I'd gone through. So now making this decision, right, to pursue this new way of life, making a commitment to it, that's so powerful because that commitment is going to be tested over and over and over again. And so, how sincerely we make this commitment to pursuing this new way of life is going to be critically important at this particular point in time. As we know, half measures avail us nothing. If we're half-ass and we're going to say, hey, these are some good ideas, I'll try some of them on, but I'm not going to really apply myself to this, it's not going to work. My dear friend Tom Rutledge was wonderful at pounding the drum that emotional sobriety is a practice. And we have to continue to practice these things and make mistakes and learn from them to acquire what in our last podcast we called a proficiency at being able to integrate these concepts into our daily life. Now, when we're making a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood Him, I want to share with you the way I think about this in my own personal recovery. You see, I think of God as within us, not outside of us. God has given me a certain capability in my life. God has given me the gift of discovering certain possibilities. And just like our friend Herb says, God also gave us free will to listen to God or not to. The same is true here, is that if I keep myself aligned with this growth force and I follow the imperative of becoming whole and by growing myself, then I tap into an incredible power that has always been there, but that I have not realized because I've used it to grow weeds instead of me. You see, none of us was a half-ass alcoholic or an addict. None of us was half-ass in our emotional dependency. When I was dependent on everything going my way for me to be okay. I still struggle with that in my life, as many of us do, but it's a lot less today. And today I can recognize it a lot faster than I did before. Will I be devoid of this? Will I never be emotionally dependent again? I doubt it. Because what I've realized in my journey is that there's low-hanging fruit. And I can see, oh yeah, that's my emotional dependency. I see how that connects to this. And I can get a hold of it. And I really, the connection is so clear and obvious. And then there's things that happen where I get upset. And I'm not as clear that this is tapping into some kind of what Bill called unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand. Until I take that situation and I start to look at it. I practice some self-examination. I start to put it under a microscope and I start to really take it apart and look at what is really going on here. And invariably, what I've discovered is what Bill said, that it's a spiritual axiom that every time I am disturbed, there's something off. He said wrong. I like the word off better. There's something off with me. And what's usually off with me is I'm demanding reality or a person to be a certain way for me to be okay. And I'm having trouble accepting the situation as it is. So, this commitment to this new path, to discovering what it means to live life that's based on a true independence of spirit, that's based on emotional autonomy, becomes an incredible journey that I'm setting myself, that I'm heading myself off into the wilderness on, because I don't know anything about it. See, I am going to finally learn how to manage myself rather than manage you and manage life. Because that's what emotional sobriety is about, is managing ourselves rather than managing life or other people. So with those comments, let me invite Julia and Tom in, and you guys can say a few things about pursuing this new way of life.
Well, I have a note here. I'm not sure I understand from talking to you earlier. It said we need to address the third, the third, the third, fourth, the third, fourth steps application to the seventh and 10th step. So I don't know what that means, but
Yeah,
maybe
well, because you complicate things so darn much. My God,
I'm
I
good
can't
at
even, this is the second, third step. Is that it's the
as
second,
opposed to the third. How about the? Oh, never
as
mind.
opposed to the first, third step, and then the seventh, third step that you're not going to take because we're going to do the second, third
Yeah,
step.
but watch this segue, Alan. It's like overcomplicating things is a big part of what this subject is about. It's and we humans we're just masterful at that. We one of the things that I think we take things that are simple and we make them complicated, and we look at complicated things and we way oversimplify them. You know, I mean, we just tend to do that. It's like, there's nothing wrong with the human race other than we tend to do everything backwards. You know, if we, it's sort of like opposite George. If you ever watch Seinfeld, we should all start just doing the opposite of what we feel like we should do, and maybe we could do better. But I just say a couple of things based on what you were saying. I like the I like the first step, and when we take that to the second step, I'm realizing first I'm powerless over alcohol in the first step, powerless over my addiction. And now, based on what we understand about emotional sobriety, I understand that when we get down to this, now we're just going to take that same statement, I am powerless over blank, and we're going to start putting other things in that blank. Because the truth is, and the generalization is, we are powerless over people, places, things, and events. You know,
Yeah.
and most importantly, we control one thing, and only one thing, and that's our mind. Not all of our mind, even a part of our thinking. We control how we get to choose how we're going to perceive something. We get to choose how we're going to interpret it, and we get to choose how we're going to respond to it. And the what I'm beginning to think emotional sobriety is, or wherever I am right now with it, as we're going through these steps, is it is this simplification process where my life is so much simpler, not easy necessarily, but simpler when I realize that my day-to-day challenge is to only focus on what I can change, what I have some control over, and realize how much and part of that is you do an inventory about how much energy do you think you've wasted in your life trying to change and control things you have no chance of changing. It's like, I mean, My God, it's an awful lot. Um, and I'm trying to read my notes here because you said one other thing I wanted to respond to before I stop. Oh, this may be kind of unrelated, it did jump into me. You were talking about your trip and the clusterfuck of your trip coming back home. Is And you were talking about that you were impressed with what you did. You were happy with what you did. What is based on some conversations I was having today. I'm going to bet you that one of the reasons, not the entire reason, but one of the reasons that you did better is because you knew you were going to come here and report to us, and you're going to tell us stories. And how do you? And this is a question. This is a question we all need to ask ourselves. How do we want to tell a story about ourselves? And it's like because it's my experience is whenever I learned a long time ago, whenever I fuck up, one of the things that helps me, one of the biggest things is as soon as I can figure out how I can use this, sort of like what Billie Jean King was talking about, how I can use and apply this lesson and how I can share it with other people, I feel good about my fuck up at that point. And
Yeah.
so what I'm thinking, but what I'm saying about you is just basically it's just accountability.
Yeah.
We don't even have to have the group with us, but because we're all in this together, I keep you in mind. I'm likely to act better. I'm actually to act more effective, to do something, and maybe take a shortcut to being emotionally sober today, rather than go through the stuff that I ordinarily would do. So anyway, that's what I got.
That's such a good point, Tom. Accountability, but also I think self-esteem, right?
Yes.
When I
Yeah.
behave in an esteemable way rather than like not going to
Yeah.
say here, right?
Yeah,
But we can be proud of ourselves, not in an unhumble way, like, look at me, I'm so great. But
Mhm.
wow, I feel good about how I handled that. I did better than I would have in the past. I was kind to others. I took responsibility for myself. And that's a much
Right.
better way to live than in a way that creates shame.
Absolutely.
Well, you know what? One of the things that I was aware of, Tom, as I was going through that, like when the last leg of my trip coming back, so it was so circuitous what happened is I'll take responsibility for not thinking this through well. So I take
Mhm.
100% responsibility in the position I put myself in. And Mikey and I talked about this. It would have been so much more effective to fly to either Seattle or San Francisco and then take a hop up from there to Kelowna, right? So
Mhm.
I went from Newark. Now, when I booked my tickets through Newark, I didn't realize they're doing all this construction on the runways. So guess what? It limits the number of planes coming in and out of Newark. Tom just had this potash the other day when he was flying to Texas. There was a 4-hour delay before his plane left. So I will take some responsibility for not paying attention, right? Not researching what's my best thing, even talking to Mikey about it. And I learned something. So once again, if you lose, don't lose the lesson. But I
Another lesson.
have
Yeah.
my
That's
lesson.
good.
So I decided, so I got from Kelowna to Toronto fine. Then I was supposed to get an 8 p.m. flight out on Sunday night that would get me into Newark at 10 o'clock. I'd be home by 11:30 or 12, right? That 8 o'clock got canceled into Newark. So now I'm in Toronto. So I go to get to the to rebook my ticket, right? So I get there and there's no flights out to Newark. And the next day they're already booked, all solid. The only possibility I've got is to fly into now Philadelphia, but my car's in Newark. So I said, okay, well, that's an easier thing. There won't be a hassle getting into Philly, right? Wrong. So I go ahead and I take my first leg from Toronto to Washington, and I get to Washington. Guess what happens to the Philly flight?
Canceled.
4-hour delay.
Uh,
So I am sitting there. My first response to this thing was not emotional sobriety, not at all. I'm going, you believe this shit. And I'm going, and then I remembered what we talked about. Alan, listen to the second voice.
mhm. Yep.
Listen to the second voice. That first voice is saying this is bullshit. I can't rely United Airlines. I'm never flying United Airlines. So I'm going to this complaining about reality. And the
Mhm.
second voice said, okay, can't do this. What can you do now? Well, I've got some writing I can do. Let me pull out
Right.
my laptop and do some writing.
Right.
I took that space and I used it constructively. I got
What am I in charge of? What can I
what am I
control?
in charge of is my attitude and my response to the
Hmm.
reality that there's going to be this delay. And so I went ahead, I grabbed myself something to eat, I got my laptop out, and I made myself at home and I did some wonderful writing. And that and then I got on the plane, got back, had to take now a Uber from Philadelphia over to Newark, and I got home, like 48 hours later. And it
Yeah.
was
Not a problem.
not a problem. It was okay. Had a nice conversation with the Uber driver that picked me up, took a nap on the way there so I could drive home and feel safe. I mean, it all turned out in terms of fine. I got home safe and I got some great writing done.
Well, and the alternative would be we would all be here just wondering where you were. We'd be looking at your empty chair and
Yeah.
just going,
And you're going to
what
complain.
I'd be saying, I'd go,
That's
who turned on his computer? It's like,
that would be funny.